So, good afternoon, everyone. How was lunch? Good. So, if anyone knows Tina, you have to thank Tina, and some others help with lunch, I know. So, anyone who helped with lunch, thank you very much. Thank you. We are very fortunate to have three of our patrons here. Would you like to stand up? We have Duchess Niven El-Gamal, Dr. Simon Nayaz, consultant psychiatrist, and Ian Pelham-Turner, who's a veteran journalist, used to be BBC royal correspondent and has all kinds of stories of the royal family. So anything happens with the royal family, he's the one to go to because and trustees. So this is Actor Donata is here as a trustee. Thank you. Do we have any other trustees? No, not at the moment. So we're very well supported by these groups and of people who are taking different roles with UPF, and without these roles, who's an ambassador for peace? Everybody. But we have an appointment of ambassadors for peace happening later this afternoon, which we're looking forward to. I'd like to ask David Hanna if he could come back up. Sorry, there you are. And give us our second presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome back, everybody. Very good to see you. So this continues our look at UPF principles of peace, and our second session here is entitled The Cause of Conflict and the Path to Peace. So this is taking perhaps an unusual route for many people, but it's based very much on the ideals that we discussed in the first presentation, and takes this line on a kind of very fundamental level, looking at the human condition and how that is really the source of the problems and the difficulties, also the key to how to solve them. So there are many kind of programs and ways of approaching conflict resolution and peace building, and there are people who are experts in that field from their studies and their training. But this is something which is kind of looking maybe underneath those problems which they're addressing very ably, to posit some further kind of way of approaching, and it leads into the UPF approach, or as we say, the UPF touch, which will be dealt with in the third presentation from our guest speaker. So we were in the first session.
Recording in progress.
Recording is in progress. I can reassure you of that, right? I hope everybody's happy. A little bit nearer or a little bit louder for the volume on the mic. Thank you. So we looked at the kind of quite an ideal picture, and I said, of course, understanding that life is not like that for perhaps the majority or large numbers of people, but still we need to appreciate, in a way, what is the original plan or purpose or potential given life and marriage, the family, these kind of ideals. The reality, of course, is we live in a world which is full of conflict, and I don't need to outline that. We are aware of many ongoing difficulties and atrocities, things which are very shocking, and they seem to happen with even greater levels of occurrence. So But let's think about some application of our living for others, which we talked about earlier. Peace comes about in that state of really living with concern for other people. And that is very much based on this pair system and relationships and having those work well, those things that we talked about earlier. And really, I have to live myself for the benefit of the whole and not just think about my own benefit. Probably, if we wanted to characterize the guiding philosophy of our, let's say, the UK, probably it boils down, for the majority, something like self-centered individualism. I'm thinking that way. Perhaps for my family, my family should be okay. And we can understand the way that people arrive at that. You have expressions in English. One I always cringe when I hear people say, you have to look after number one. Right? You hear that sometimes? That is a kind of definition of self-centeredness, really. Although it's important, but how does a person or an individual get taken care of? Actually, when a person lives for the whole of which they are a part, this is our interdependence that we talked about, then the individual living for the whole then supports the individual naturally and should do naturally. Of course, not all governmental systems or regimes or this kind of thing work that way. They are an obstacle to that. But in the natural order of things, this is how life should be. If you really invest yourself in caring for, say, 10 close friends in your life, if a problem comes up and you are in difficulty, do you think they're just going to ignore you? No, they will come and help and offer help, and it'll naturally kind of come back. When people receive something given with true love and genuine heart, you can't deny that. You always have to look after such a person. That's why people naturally feel to look after their aging parents. When they're getting to that stage, they can't perhaps look after themselves like they used to. So you're going to step in and do something. It's the cycle of life, in a way, if it's living according to these principles. But the cause of conflicts comes when a self-centered individual, really, which means having less regard for this higher purpose, not living for that higher purpose, but for a selfish purpose, thinks, well, others exist largely for my benefit. That's why. And that's what they should be doing, looking after me. So this diminishes and ignores the value of the whole. They're living with this kind of mind. I'm a little bit separate from the whole. Society, they'll talk about society or the government or this or that, like people over there, right? And then there's me, and I'm not being helped, I'm not being supported, and not being understood. This kind of feeling. So thinking of oneself as a separate and most important individual, then this is dragging that kind of energy from the whole and not contributing anything back. There are some ideologies which we've witnessed in the previous century and are still kind of working in different forms today, like that of communism, which have justified, in terms of their intellectual backing, they've justified and engaged in conflict, like deliberately, like conflict is the way to progress and to make advances and to get the kind of ideal society which we're looking for. Here is Father Moon in the 1970s, who actually attracted a lot of opprobrium and a lot of unfair attacks because of his stance on communism and providing worldwide education programs which really showed the fallacies of Marxist-Leninism and presented a very profound critique and counter-proposal to those ideas. And nobody had done that until then in such a way. But of course, you start to do that and you make enemies, right? So if you hear strange-sounding rumors about Father and Mother Moon's work and Unification Movement's work, and you have to bear in mind that possibly they come from those kind of sources who are still out to destroy this good work. My father said in 1970s, according to the logic of communism, there will be constant struggles as long as there are classes of people. But in our ideology, or our UPF principles of peace, there are no class differences, but only family relationships. Here there's no discrimination, there are no people above or below, but only the relationship between parents and children providing order in the family. So there is order, there are certain positions, there are responsibilities that come with those, but it's not a case of somebody dominating somebody else. And he went on to say, according to the communist ideology, mine is mine and yours is mine. On our part, we must think, mine is yours, and yours is the nations, and the nations is the world's, and the world's is God's, and God's is mine. So the spirit of unification, he said, must be greater than the power of communism. In other words, we have to speak out and live by these principles and make them very well known with enthusiasm and zeal, and in practice and in hope and in ideals. So when we look at the reality of the human nature, or sometimes we call it the human condition, we have some selfish nature, which is often well developed, but we have an original nature. That's where our conscience lies. Everybody has a conscience, right? Whether it's so visible or not, even the worst behaved person, they have a conscience, they have something there which can be touched and can be spoken to if you're in conversation with such a person. So they have an original nature, and it's largely undeveloped. So this is what we've inherited. It's in our lineage, really, as human beings. And religion will take the view that it comes from the very beginning, like it was there even at the first family. And it's been passed on from generation to generation. It doesn't mean it should be there or can't be got rid of. It means we've gone on a kind of deviated path as human beings, and now we have to kind of pick up on our original growth and development and complete our growth to be true human beings, people of true humanity, and let that shine. Again, this leads us back to what we said in the very beginning about education and taking care of the next generations to come for that new set of people, right? Do you remember them we talked about? In 100 years, there will be a whole new set of people in the world. So how are they going to be educated? Then the conflicted self is talked about in the different religious traditions of the world. And I've taken a little sample of some. If your particular tradition is not represented, I apologize for that. I wasn't going to include everybody, but just some examples. Here in Sikhism, from the Adi Granth Sahib, it says, whoever proclaims himself good, no, goodness approaches him not. These all tend to be worded in quite poetic language, right? But what is this saying? It's saying simply, as soon as you proclaim, especially say to others, I'm good, I'm a good person, right? Well, that's already a little bit of a danger signal, right? Perhaps you're not so good as you think you are. So good is not approaching you in that moment. So we need some humility and some recognition of our own faults, and that's a good starting point. In Hinduism, in the Maitreya Upanishad, it says, the mind is twofold, the pure and also the impure. Insightful. And also, you get a similar thing, very simple but truthful language in Native American tradition. It says, every person has both a bad heart and a good heart. That's from the Mohawk tribe. So it's looking at this human situation and saying, yes, you have to remember every person is like this. They have some good heart and some bad heart. Right? You can't condemn a person entirely, but you have to work with their good heart. Here in the Christian tradition, in the writings of Saint Paul, who, if you're not familiar with him, then he never met Jesus personally, but he had a spiritual awakening and experience of Jesus that turned him from a persecutor of Christians actually to the foremost kind of missionary of the early church going around the Mediterranean. He writes here in the book of Romans, about his own inner difficulties. And he says, I do not do the good that I want, but the evil I do not want is what I do. So he's struggling with something inside himself, even though we call him Saint Paul, a very saintly person. I'm sure he was a very good man. But something in him was bothering him. Right? We don't know what it is, annoyingly. Right? He never tells us. He talks about a thorn in his side. And my guess is it's probably something like he just found it difficult to love a certain person or a certain group of people, something like that. And he just couldn't, he knew he should be able to, but he couldn't do it. And it troubled him. And he felt there was another law at war with the law of his mind in his body. And it's like fighting, inner fighting going on. You see something here in the Sufi tradition within Islam from a scholar here. We have returned from the lesser jihad to the greater jihad. And when asked what the greater jihad was, he replied, it is the struggle against one's self. That's the kind of battle which is going on inside. And here in the Sufi tradition, this is the Sufi tradition from, again, within Islam. The greatest struggle is with the soul that dwells within your sides, for it is your constant companion. If you overcome it, you will master all else. But if it overcomes you, you will be vanquished by everything. Wow. So we see similar ideas approached in these different traditions, which again indicates there's a kind of universal problem. And people with a more spiritual mind, a prayerful mind, looking at the inner self and reflecting that way, are discovering this and striving to overcome that and give the necessary guidance to people how to overcome that. So a conflict in the mind starts with certain drawing towards, we can say, an evil side, selfish thoughts or words, actions where the body is immediately dominating the situation or pulling one towards action. Perhaps it's to react violently very quickly, or to express your anger as your first response, or things which come more from the physical side and control the mind. Or you have things from your conscience drawing you towards the good, unselfish thoughts and words and actions. That's where that original mind inside you is leading you in the other direction. But the result is some kind of tension. And people talk about this kind of, pricking of their conscience or struggles with their conscience, and you see people with this kind of mind. Maybe somebody finds a purse on the ground when they're out shopping, and there's quite a bit of money in that purse. So there's like one mind saying, go, just take it. Nobody sees them, right? Take it. And another mind says, no, actually, this is somebody's. They're missing this. If I'd lost my wallet and my money, I would be very unhappy. But to get it back, I'd feel my faith in humanity is restored, So which is it going to be? But then you wonder, why is a person troubled by that anyway, right? Why does it create such a problem for you? I should do this or I should do this. Which is it? Which is it going to be, right? No, we should be very clear. If we're living by clear principles of goodness in our mind, the answer is already there, I'm going to hand this in. And, So there's a battle in the mind of each person, and this battle then manifests as conflicts, perhaps in the family, because such a conflicted person, if that's the father in the family, he's not going to treat or respect his wife as he should. He's not going to relate to his children as he should. It's going to kind of come out somehow. You can't live with that contradiction and not affect other people. Are you with me? So we see this kind of origin of conflict, and the explanations for this come again in different traditions, different stories, broadly religious, but not exclusively. Sometimes cultures have their own tales, kind of myths which are containing very profound truths or deep insights sometimes, and it contains some intuitive understanding of the human condition and a metaphorical understanding very often, or is expressed that way. And one of those is in the Judeo-Christian tradition, and also in Islam, we see the story in the beginning of the textbooks for the first human ancestors who were told or given a commandment: you can freely eat of any fruit of the trees in this beautiful garden in which you find yourselves, but of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. And they're given a strong prohibition, for in the day that you eat of it you shall die. But they're very tempted to eat it and end up doing that. So, not to look more deeply into that story in the specifics, but to mention Father Moon's conclusion from his research and his prayer and his study of Holy Scriptures of different traditions. He concluded that this fruit that's being talked about in this famous story is actually a metaphor. It sounds metaphorical anyway, because there's no tree called the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It's obviously referring to something. So what is the fruit? He said not a literal fruit. This fruit is in fact love itself. It's love itself, but it's the holy husband-wife relationship in particular, which needs to be in the context of marriage and explored and developed that way. So fruit is something which comes, when you are mature, when the tree is mature, and it's going to hold the seeds for the future generations as well. So it is quite a good metaphor, actually, if you take it this way. And also, you see in biblical language, to know, when that word is sometimes used, it's used to mean to have sexual relationship. Also, to bear fruit means produce a good result, doesn't it? You have some result anyway, which is going to get passed on, in this case, down through one's lineage. And in the story, this fruit is obviously more desirable than life itself. In the day that you eat of it, you shall die. That's a serious warning, but still they go ahead and they eat of that fruit. So it was more tempting or more promising or more easily tempted by or seduced by somebody into experimenting with that. So it's portrayed as being essential to fulfilling life's goals as well. It's described as a kind of tree of life that needs to be attained. But having eaten of the fruit against this prohibition, the first ancestors have the way to the tree of life blocked. So they can't realize their goals, their ambitions, their hopes, their dreams. Things are frustrated. What is interesting, and what I like to do, is to research other scriptures on this topic. And here from Jainism, in the Uttaranga Sutram, we have, "It is better to die than to indulge in partaking of forbidden lustful pleasure." That's quite strong, isn't it? Right? It always surprises me. It's just lays it out on the table there, right? Very powerful. And it's talking about the kind of impact of sexual immorality or the misuse of love or the corruption of love in that way. In Buddhism, it also says the man who goes to the wife of another digs up the very roots of life. It's profoundly disturbing if you engage in some extramarital affair or some adultery. It's really damaging. To what? To that original kind of beautiful ideal that we talked about earlier, right? It's the most disruptive thing. Or in the Holy Quran, do not come near adultery, for it is a shameful deed and evil, opening the road to other evils. Would you like some more? I don't know. What was the wicked serpent contemplating at that time? He thought, I shall go and kill Adam and wed his wife, and I shall be the king over the whole world. This is in the Talmud, the commentary on the Torah, and saying there's a bigger motivation behind, in this case, the fallen archangel's seduction of Eve. Also, we have in Christianity, you have flee from sexual immorality. He who sins sexually sins against his own body. It's a violation of your holy temple. It's doing damage to yourself as well as others. And here in Islam again, O children of Adam, let not Satan seduce you in the same manner as he got your parents out of the garden, referring to that first ancestors' story, stripping them of their clothing in order to expose their private parts. Or final one is from Sikhism. Sexual desire is the window. Pain and pleasure are the gatekeepers. Virtue and sin are the gates. So clearly this is something which can go either way, highly fulfilling and beautiful and holy, or very damaging and disruptive and dangerous. This is it. This is some kind of responsibility that comes with love in a human relationship. And that's different to the animal kingdom, for example. We have responsibility in love and need restraint and self-control, and we need to use it properly. And it's open to serious misuse. So this is where so many problems originate from. I always think you could take a quite different perspective. You could start looking sociologically at the problems of society and you work it back. It's largely about how love has been misused in the parents or the grandparents or something in that line, of which the person who's having difficulty is just the kind of fruit. And that's what they've learned or inherited or come up with. That's a good way of doing it, but it misses out the kind of spiritual dimension, actually, and the damage that is done. We'll mention that a little bit later. So this understanding is saying that our first human ancestors were growing to perfection, and like these green levels represent 3 stages of growth and development to maturity as an adult, spiritually mature person. And during that growth period, they were given a prohibition, do not eat of the fruit. In other words, live as brother and sister. When the time comes, you can be married with God's blessing, and you can do that only and when you are mature spiritually, because you can handle all that comes with that kind of next level of development, that oh so important second blessing. Do you remember that, of our kind of 3 foundations of peace that we looked at in the first session? Do you remember that? Yes. That was way back in the morning, sometime, long time ago, before lunch, before all that, right? Yes. Oh, I remember that. Yeah, there we go. And this is saying that, yes, this idea, kind of religious idea, isn't it, of the fall, is that first human ancestors fell into a kind of territory or realm which was outside of the original intended creation. It's what we call hell in theological terms, something which wasn't part of the original plan at all. So, but if they had been blessed and married and were mature, then they would be free to enjoy that relationship. Here's kind of put into words from the founder. He said, what's the reality of our world today? Disorder and sickness of every kind, including war, violence, and drug abuse. They've infected humankind. More important, the rapid collapse of sexual morality among the young, the increasing divorce rate, the breakdown of the family, they're all destroying the foundation of human society. And all these things originate from the fall. It's not that people have not, so even in religious circles, so this is the time. Unless we expose this kind of problem, we're not going to be able to deal with it. And all problems originate from this. I'm going to test you now. Do you remember this definition from earlier? True, genuine love is unconditionally caring about the happiness of another person. Well, we can say the false love that we alluded to before in the quote from Sikhism, false love or conditional love or imitation love could be expressed, I care how you make me feel. It's all about my feeling, right? And that's very much love in our current society, right? Love in the kind of pop culture and the movie culture and everything is about, I care how you make me feel. If I feel good, then I love you. If you make me feel loved, I love you. But did you just criticize me? Did you just point out some fault? I don't love you anymore, right? This kind of thing. Or love kind of, people fall in love with falling in love because the feelings associated with that are so captivating that they want to embark on a series of relationships and they become tired of relationships and they seek another one, serial relationships. And this is actually long-term quite damaging because we lose faith in love itself. There are 3 foundations you'll remember. This is all revision now for you. If you are presented with an exam at the end, which we don't do, by the way, but the thought just came to me, right? We could have a little test at the end. We talked about individual peace, peace in the family and in society, and we talked about universal peace. These 3 beautiful foundations, we said, which everything we want for life is in there, actually. This is our purpose for which we were created, and therefore, purpose doesn't come from the created object, it comes from the creator. When we make something, we give it a purpose and create it according to the purpose which is in our mind. It's like a starting point. Well, then we see, as a result, in human society, from the very earliest times, we have to imagine, corrupted foundations. There's mind and body in conflict. Why? Because it's not centered on a common purpose and common values. It's mind and body are centered or influenced by certain evil intentions or self-centered intentions. And secondly, we'll see peace in the family is really affected. So the result of the fall here, and this is in a little home study course on the state that the world is under evil influences is to suggest that there are negative spiritual forces operating in our lives. Such a person only as long as he or she cooperates with them, right? That takes some thinking about, really. They're there, but they don't affect you unless you start to make that the kind of basis of your relationship. You're thinking about these things. You're watching those movies. You're looking at those internet sites. You're meeting with the wrong people. You're getting into the wrong kind of conversations, or this kind of thing. You're starting to entertain the wrong thoughts in your mind. These are influences which we are in control of, but sometimes people use it as an excuse. You hear somebody who, maybe they had an adulterous affair or something and they're found out, and they'll say things like, I don't know what came over me, right? Or I don't know what happened, or something made me do it, but I don't know, something. No, this is your problem, right? You have to speak with such a person quite strongly because, you're the one with the mind that makes those choices, actually. You can't blame it on something or someone else. And we know evil influences can be quite prominent in murder cases as well. So this is the second kind of corrupted foundation, is when such a person brings themselves into a marriage relationship. because you're bringing in immature self or a selfish self. And even though love may be rosy in the beginning, those problems in yourself are going to come out at some stage, right? You're going to think more about yourself than about your wife or your children, if you're in the husband's position, right? And likewise for anybody in that family. So that's why there's an importance here on developing the self and finding peace in the self first of all, and a kind of maturity in the spiritual aspect of one's life before you bring that into something as significant and important as a marriage and consequent family. Are you with me? Yeah. So this is why. And of course, this also disturbs our relationship with the rest of the world around us. We see evil influences affecting people in relationship to the creation around us. Greed is the big factor. Doing things, destroying things, not with a thought about the future or what legacy we're leaving, but just for personal profit and gain, or as companies doing that, or even as nations doing that. So, out of his analysis of this story of the fall, which although presented in almost like myth or in metaphors, through his deep prayer and also subsequent revelations, Father Moon discerned that there were 4 aspects to the nature that we've inherited as human beings, our kind of corrupted nature or our fallen nature. The first is not loving others from God's standpoint. We don't take God's standpoint in loving others, or a parental position of love towards others. We take a more self-centered perspective. And that leads us to leave our proper position or our proper responsibility, and that causes disruption in the proper order, and we end up multiplying problems and evil. So I liken it sometimes to falling downstairs. You know how easy that is to do? If you're in the night and you trip over on the top step, you're going to kind of roll down and cause some real damage to yourself and possibly others. So, imagine that there's an office and 2 people are chasing a job opening, right? There's a job comes free, a higher kind of position in the office, and there are 2 people who feel, oh, I'm going to apply for that. One is thinking, well, I think I could do the job, and if they ask me, and if I pass the necessary, interviews, then I'd be very willing to take that on. Another person is thinking, this is for me. I'm the one for this job, right? They have quite a different mind. Huh? And, what starts as just a self-centered viewpoint is just in a person's mind. It's not hurting anybody, It's there. It starts in the mind. And nobody can tell that it's even there, but it's there. And then that person starts to neglect their own responsibility because they're thinking, how can I get this job? How can I, they're putting a lot of mental effort into that, and they're believing themselves to be better than others. Of course, this applies to many other situations as well, right? They have this kind of course, I know better. Of course, I'm the better person for the job. And then they start to turn that into action. Maybe they start to put down the other candidate in front of their fellow workmates, right? And they spread a few little rumors and say, this person, did you know what they said about the boss? It's terrible. Don't pass it on, please, right? But I'm going to tell you. And they're trying to increase their own chances. Even in government, they make leaks, right? They're trying to pull down somebody else. So it's trying to advance yourself by pulling down somebody. So this is where evil nature starts to kick in, and it starts to cause harm to other people. And maybe such a person goes around others and gets them to kind of back them up. Put in a good word for me. If you put in a good word for me, then when I'm in that top position, I'll make sure you don't miss out. I'll put in for a raise or something like that. This kind of subtle bribery going on, maybe not quite bribery, but I'll make it easier for you. You're getting friends this way. So this kind of behavior is coming from fallen nature. And it's so common, we're almost used to it. We see it. It's, of course, the stuff of literature, but that's because people are fascinated by exploring the human condition and wondering, is this just human nature or can it be different? And then that person feels justified at getting others even to do their own dirty work. That's when you become really adept at this kind of, right, self-centered operation. You're getting other people to do everything for you and nothing leads back to you. No kind of paper trail, no indication that it was you. You can always blame somebody else, right? So this knowledge is a very invaluable tool, actually, this understanding of the corruption or fallen nature. But I say here, I may want to find fault in other people. And having given that short lesson, you may be seeing it everywhere. I know what this person is doing now, right? But the better way is to take a look at oneself and think, in what way am I doing that? And sometimes a good defense to that is just to have a good laugh, right? Sometimes I catch myself and I think I just said that to make myself look good, right? And you think, well, that's so stupid, really, right? It probably doesn't work, and I certainly don't believe it. So, you know what I mean, right? So catch yourself and think. And that, of course, is, the religious part is always to look inside oneself and correct oneself. Because in the end, that's what you can do. And when you change yourself, you can positively change those who interact with you. That's the thing that's going to change them more than, there's nothing you can do to change them, really. You can talk to them and maybe hope something goes in, but it's notoriously difficult, right? So if we think about what's the kind of restitution of this, or the path to peace, well, we've been describing things that are very much in the mind and then affect our action, right? So you look even to, it's a bit of an atheistic covenant or a godless covenant here, the UNESCO Constitution preamble for the United Nations, but it does say there, since wars begin in the minds of men, and I think it probably is largely men, it is in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed. So we have to win this battle. It's in the mind. So that was understood, even, and put in writing there, which I think is significant. Our Mother of Peace, Mrs. Moon, she also used this title as a kind of, as a title for her public speeches, which were given in recent years. Peace starts with me. Sounds very modern and kind of chirpy, but actually it's an age-old message, right, of people of faith. Peace starts with me. I have to make that first individual foundation of peace, right, and do it in myself. So I have to become a person of integrity and a person of true love. And she used that to great effect, actually, to bring large crowds together and from different faiths and denominations and walks of life. So we use the term restoration. And what is restoration? Restoration, in certain traditions, people may say, I recognize that. That's what we call salvation, or that's what we call enlightenment, or that's what we call, different terms for these kind of things. But restoration is used because it describes quite accurately what is going on here. A person may have an original position or status, but through some misdeed of their own doing, they lose that position and status, and they're faced with a current reality. It could be that, you lied to a friend, something as simple as that, and now the friend doesn't trust you and doesn't want to be a friend anymore. So you're thinking, how can I win that back? That was a mistake on my part, and I want to be friends with that person, so I have to do something. So we have to restore it. Restoring is going back the opposite way and regaining our original position or status. We have to think in broad terms. This is what has to be done with the human condition as well. So we have to take responsibility to correct any wrongdoing. We have to make a conscious effort to restore what was lost. It has to be deliberately done in that way. And we have to go the reverse way of how the damage came about. It came about a certain way. We have to go the opposite way and try to resolve that. So we call this restoration. And in this scheme, we can say that God's effort is like 95% of the work and will set up certain situations or opportunities for us to restore any problem. Our effort is required, though. We call it 5% responsibility. It's small, but it requires your 100% effort. So this allies with a little maxim that I personally like very much. It comes from 4th century St. Augustine. Do you remember him, anybody? And he said here, pray as though everything depended on God, and work as though everything depended on you. Right? And maybe there's a kind of something of that in the UPF approach as well, right? So in this exercise, there are always 2 steps. The first we call like vertical, restoring the vertical relationship, which is that with God's word or higher values, and we are, involved in this inward reflection and self-reflection and looking at myself and trying to awaken my conscience and sharpen my conscience. And I do that in kind of relation with somebody I respect in the spiritual journey, maybe higher than myself, or some holy scripture that I get advice from or some enlightenment from. And that's one aspect, restoring a vertical aspect. But there's also another. That other is establishing a proper horizontal order, which means with my brother or sister, making good horizontal relationships with my fellow human beings. And success in both areas is needed to move closer to the goal of peace. I like how it's expressed in the Holy Quran. It says, the repayment of a bad action is one equivalent to it. But whoever pardons and makes reconciliation, his reward lies with God. He does not love the unjust, but whoever endures patiently and forgives, this is a sign, or that is a sign of real resolve. It's also very much a central teaching, this restoration of vertical and horizontal relationships in Jewish and Christian teaching as well. Jesus talks about the most important law, or the first law, being love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind, or strength. Sometimes it's or might, is translated different ways. He's quoting the Jewish Torah or Old Testament, Deuteronomy, so it's not his original words. He's asked to pick out the most important law amongst the 630-odd laws of the Old Testament. And he says, well, you can't have one without the other. The second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. So you have to put that in order as well, on the basis of getting the vertical right. And we find it, maybe not spelt out, but look how it's here in the Holy Quran. Be steadfast in prayer and regular in charity. That's it, isn't it, right? Steadfast in prayer is your resolve to better this relationship in a vertical sense, and regular in charity means doing something for other people and giving in that way. And whatever good you send forth for your souls before you, you shall find it with Allah. Or here in Sikhism, where there is forgiveness, there is God himself. That's where you'll find it. How's everybody doing? You okay? Wow. There was, according to the biblical stories, conflict in the first family. So not only a problem in the parents' generation, but that is somehow fed into the next generation, the children's generation. And because the problem is multiplied there, things get decidedly worse, right? So there's a parents' problem, that's Adam and Eve, first ancestors, who engaged in illicit love and inherited this fallen nature that we've talked about, and then practiced and passed it on. It's almost like something passed on through the blood. And it's visited on the next generation. And we have a story there, again, in the kind of mythical folk tale that is the recorded story of Cain and Abel, of the first murder, brother by brother. And that's, a real tragedy, because the parents weren't in a position to prevent that or to stop that happening. And somewhere, what is a problem in the parents' generation now becomes very substantial. And I always think there must have been some first time that a human being killed another human being, right? In that kind of way. There must have been a first time for that. And it sets a tradition. Always the first time of something sets a kind of tradition. There's a big difference, isn't there, between never stealing anything in your life and just taking one thing. There's a big difference, right? And often when a person just gives in to stealing one thing, then it's much easier to steal the next thing. So you start to realize you can get away with it maybe and justify yourself. So much better not to do. So there's an archetype of conflict here in this story. That's why Father Moon went back to this and drew an enormous amount from it, actually, by including also other insights and other intuitions and revelations. So not just relying on that story, but saying God wanted to embrace both Cain and Abel. And looking at these words in Genesis, it's very, I don't know, I always think it's a bit of psychology, actually, right, going on here. Because God says to Cain, the brother who's prone to anger, if you do what is right, will you not be accepted? In other words, it's fine, you just have to do what is right. But if you do not do what is right, and it's like the choice is yours, sin is crouching at the door, or at your door. Its desire is for you, but you must master it. In other words, he's being told, get a grip of these feelings. Get a grip of this kind of, tendency to want to lash out and this feeling of resentment and these overpowering emotions. You have to get a grip of it. You have to deal with your fallen nature, in other words, right? So we see in this archetype of conflict, this conflict between brothers, Abel loved God and his offering was accepted. That's the story. And he had God's blessing. But, perhaps he was unwilling to share that. Perhaps he wasn't as concerned for his elder brother as he should have been. That's very possible. And in Cain's position, Cain was filled with resentment. Why? Because his brother's offering was accepted, but his wasn't. So he feels, a lot of anger. And he wants to direct that. He wants to direct it towards his brother. And he was jealous. And he was unable to control this anger and rage to the point of killing his brother, which is a terrible thing. What should Abel have done? We could say he should be humble, certainly. If he wasn't, he should be humble, and he should forgive, and he should serve his brother, should help his brother, maybe go and offer some advice that would be helpful. But most of all, he has to stand right with God as an individual. And Cain should do certain things as well. He has his responsibility. That is to let go of resentment, and he has to value his brother and see him maybe in a new light, and be ready to reconcile and value that reconciliation more than kind of giving in to his resentment. And he has to not act violently. So his responsibility is to overcome that fallen nature that we talked about. Actually, interestingly, in Father Moon's analysis of these biblical stories, he says, this is finally overcome. It becomes a recurring problem, not solved in this family, but wait until a later family. In the third generation of Abraham's family, you see twins one is slightly elder than the other, that's Esau compared to Jacob, they have a long-going 21-year battle, and it's resolved, and they can make friends and they can unite. So that is the kind of resolution of this problem in a central family, and therefore it allows the kind of work of God to progress from that time on. So it becomes a helpful typology, this Cain-Abel struggle or Cain-Abel conflict. And Father Moon would refer to this a lot. I was looking back at his original founding speech for UPF, and he talks about this a lot, actually, this struggle between brothers. So there are certain positions that he talks about, like there's a Cain position or an Abel type position, or a Cain-type worldview and an Abel-type worldview. So he uses this to describe certain approaches to life. You can guess that the Cain-type approach is very much kind of prone to violent action, right? You know, let's rise up in revolution. Let's kill the ruling class or whatever, right? You know, there's this kind of spirit. The Abel tradition is much more one of let's make sacrifices and seek a more way of reconciliation. But it's not simply kind of good and evil, so don't understand it that way. Both sides have a kind of mixture of good aspects and bad aspects. But Cain has to come through his younger brother to be united and accepted by God. He has to learn from him and follow his way. It's not going to be easy, but he needs to do that. So the brothers must unite, and they must go together this way of goodness. And we see this typology used to describe, say, the battle between the mind and body. We covered that earlier, right? You could say, well, the body is like in the Cain position, the mind is in the Abel position, and the body has to come through the mind that way to be reunited with God and under that kind of control and discipline. Or you can say, in religion, wherever you have some central person who's like a spokesperson or a mouthpiece for God, a guru of some sort, they will have devotees, right? People who really look to that person as a great teacher. And you try to learn as much as you can from your teacher. So you go this way, you recognize yourself as Cain, and you want to find your teacher as Abel and go through that person by uniting with them, by following their words and their advice and trying to live like them, and then you can gain all the benefits and blessings that Abel-type figure did or does. So this is the way of religion, and you see almost every religion is structured this way, isn't it, right? You have some, whether it's the prophet, peace be upon him, or whether it's a Messiah figure like Jesus, or whether, saints and sages which occur, or great prophets which occur in Judaism. You will have these people, and by following your Abel, you can get rid of your fallen nature and you become more godly. How wonderful. We all want to do that, right? Yeah. So in Father Moon's typology, this is where, communism is more on the kind of Cain-type ideology, and democracy is the more Abel-type ideology. We could say, as long as it's embracing and holding fast to its kind of original principles, and it's allowing space for faith to operate in that way within its realm. And also you can say any issue, there's a Cain-type view and an Abel-type view. Two sides, two arguments, quite often well-developed arguments, right? It could be on, what are current dilemmas, like the abortion question, or euthanasia question, or whatever it is. There's going to be a kind of two quite well-defined arguments and well-supported arguments, but, one is the more Cain-type and one is the more embracing of faith and the value of human life, etc. So this is something new if you haven't been in this talk before, right? I thought, well, I don't want it to appear like, Cain is evil and Abel is good, because we're kind of patting ourselves on the back, aren't we, if we do that? There's a danger of that. But both sides have faults. There are failures on both sides. On the Abel side, one of our current problems, like you think of the democratic world, for example, is self-centered individualism. This is what we talked about earlier. Also, there's quite often religious intolerance, free to operate in our society. There's an indifference to justice in many ways, or to injustice, and not really taking a stand, more concerned with one's own needs. There is racism, and that's, prevalent and it's not gone away. There's also a very materialistic culture, which is, again, the wrong order of priorities, and there's a lot of moral corruption. Given the freedoms that we have, they're being misused in a great way. So there are faults on the Abel side, and there are faults on the Cain side as well. There's abuse of individuals. We think of the whole gulag system under communism, and kind of people disappearing in the night. Anybody who's expressed any opposition to party policy is, treated as a criminal. And there are suppression of religion very deliberately and very openly. And there's violent revolution being encouraged and promoted and exported. And there's racism as well, because communism never solved that problem, right? They never could get over these kind of barriers. They didn't have the ideology to do it or the thinking to do it. And also, it's openly materialistic culture, denying God and the spiritual aspects of life. So absolutely, yes, it has that as a fault. And much moral corruption going on as well, without the means to deal with that. So we can say, well, especially as UPF, we are more this kind of good-hearted, like-minded people who are definitely more of the Abel type side. I think that's absolutely true. But as Abel, we have to address these problems in our society, right? Therefore, that needs to be tackled. And not only that, we have to be of the mind to win the heart of Cain. And that's important in any kind of conflict or situation where there is no peace. Have to win the heart of the more Cain type side. And how do you do that? You do it through love, certainly, the genuine, true love that we talked about, through service, through self-sacrifice, through bringing God's perspective through divine truth. We have to bring this kind of to bear to close that gap and win over the heart of those people who might be filled with desire for anger or violence or worse. So in Sun Myung Moon's philosophy of peace, we see that it blends very interesting range of things from the individual, which we talked about, has familial and global elements as well. So it's a very comprehensive and universal approach to peacemaking and to really bringing in an era which we could call the ideal, harmonious world. He himself called this philosophy of peace sometimes Godism. Do you like that term? Or maybe if it wasn't such a faith-based audience, he would say parentism. It's the same, right? Parentism or Godism or unificationism, right? Different names for the same thing. And that was his line and his life's work and his legacy. And really, still we are, I would say, in early days. Right? It's early days yet. And the task, of course, is huge and in a way getting bigger all the time. But nevertheless, once this truth is in the world and it gets picked up by more and more people and gets fed into the education system, we will see dramatic change. It's not going back now, right? This is out of the box, right? So let me end with two beautiful quotations. One from a very interesting person of the 20th century, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He said, "We must discover the power of love, the redemptive power of love. And when we discover that, we will be able to make of this old world a new world. We will be able to make men better. Love is the only way." And Father Moon kind of echoed a similar vein on many occasions, but I've chosen one here. I am teaching you to love those who hate you. If you love them, sooner or later they will come to like you. If you return good 3 times for every time someone does you wrong, eventually that person will bow his head. Try it yourself and see if I am right or not. Everyone has a conscience. Thank you very much, everybody. Bless you. I don't know.
Shall we ask?
Yes, yes. How would you like to play the next little time? How did you get on with your discussion circles earlier?
Yeah,
did you enjoy that? And hearing people's opinions. We'd like to do that again. If anybody has a specific question, I'm happy to take it. But also those can be asked in your circles, and you'll get a variety of answers, which is always very helpful, right? So let's. Yes, Akta.
Where did you get your material for your speech?
From our
I have that on the next side. It's kind of like a little disclaimer, right? Oh, no, you can't see it now. It's all right. Well, from a variety of sources. But the main, is the standard textbook of UPF and Unification Movement. These principles of peace that are developed based on Father Moon's teaching. So, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Okay, another.
Yes, go ahead. Excuse me if I...
Can you stand up? Stand up.
One reason why we didn't engage in too much back and forth is because we need a microphone. But we have one on hand. Thank you, Raymond.
Based on your presentation, I assume you acknowledge all religion on the humanities. Is that what you stand for?
All religions?
On the humanity.
Yes. That's right. And that was how I think we started on that point and tried to make sure it was there in the beginning. Thank you very much. Yeah. So also let's acknowledge that we have people online. I don't know if they can ask questions, but we're very grateful for your following. I think it's probably on Facebook, right? So no questions. But yes, please, go ahead.
Thank you.
Introduce yourself and...
My name is Nelly Stefanova. I would like to say that I loved your presentation. You are a really great lecturer, so thank you about that. I think all of us learned a lot from your lecture, and thank you for comparing different religions, values. This is also very important because...
And also to show that we like.
Exactly. My belief is the more we know about each other, the less conflicts we will have and misunderstandings among each other. But I have one question. I came from ex-socialist country, Bulgaria, and I suffered personally enough from communism. But my question is, why you only kind of describe communism as the utter evil, as it is, no argument about that, but what about fascism? What about Nazism? I don't think they are better
absolutely. I was
ideologies.
Just referring to one example and then very...
Not that there are not other examples.
Not that there are others, yes. We have a few candidates for that, don't worry.
Thank you.
Quite understand. Thank you, yeah. Thank you so much. So I think little groups again.
Shall we do little groups again?
And when is our meeting time? It's a shorter.
Yeah, this is about 15 minutes.
It's not my job, so I'm going to ask Robin, come on up.
This is for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
All
right.
For all.
So maybe
Is it
just...
20 minutes for all?
So 15
minutes here.
For a group
and
discussion,
then,
15
and then
minute
the
break.
drinks will be outside for break. Even if people are still talking, you can drink. You can have a drink.
And we come back at 15:40.
15:40.
Wonderful.
15:40. Where is it?
So if you want to...
Let's do the tables again. Shall we?
Please break into similar groups the last time.
You know, the people can may feel inside more and more.
Okay, we can also